You're going to focus on that.
I'm going to call the regular city council meeting closed session to order, please. And I'm going to let the record reflect that all the council members are here. So with that, I'm going to ask the city attorney the reasons why we're going into closed session.
Could we have the clerk call roll call, though, for the meeting?
I was going to save that for the open session.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then we're going to go into closed session. We have 2 items listed on the agenda: anticipated litigation, significant exposure under Government Code 54956.9, as well as existing litigation related to the OPV Coalition case. And if there's any reportable action, I'll make that report when we return. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we are going to recess to a closed session. We'll be back at 5. I wanted to make sure. I didn't, that's why I tapped it really easy.
We're now live.
Okay, with that, I'm going to call us back into open session, and I'm going to ask the city clerk for a roll call, please, for both the city council and the Camarillo Sanitary District, please.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Here.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Here.
Councilmember Tremblay, Vice Mayor Tennyson,
Here.
and Mayor Kildee.
Here. Okay, so with that, I'm going to have a flag salute, and I'm going to ask the two individuals, Noah and Nathan, would you like to lead us in a flag salute? And if you will, you can come right up to the podium there, and you can lead us in the flag salute. Here's the flag right here. Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, so the approval agenda, are there any changes to the agenda? If not, we'll approve them. And now the exciting part of the agenda tonight is we have a presentation, and it's the Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year. And we've got Nathan Wilson and Noah Harding. So I'm going to ask if you would please come up to the right of me here. And I want to present to you two certificates along with Roberto Martinez. So Roberto, come up and join us too. That would be terrific. Okay, can you hear me all right?
No. No.
Can't hear me? Okay, well, I'm going to do it without a microphone then. All right, thank you so much for being here. This is a great event for us here, and we have two of Camarillo's finest right here to the right of me. Some of the best and the brightest that our city has here. So they're two outstanding individuals. We've had a long history of this with Roberto, and this is another example of the greatness of the tree that these two young individuals have fallen off, and we know that they're going to do some great things in their life. So I'm going to start with Noah, and I just want to read a little bit about this, and after I introduce and present these certificates to them, I'll ask both of you if you'd like to make any comments, as well as Roberto, if he'd like to make some comments. So the city of Camarillo extends its congratulations for being selected the Boys and Girls Club of Camarillo 2025 Junior Youth of the Year for demonstrating exceptional character, accomplishments through your service, and participation in the club. Your positive attitude and commitment for your academic performance is greatly appreciated. And Noah, we're so proud of you. Congratulations to you and your family and your friends. Whoever else is here, I want to present this to you. And I will ask, would you like to make any comments at this time? If not, we can wait to the end.
I would just love to thank Roberto and Carlos for helping me out for these 4 years and helping me get to where I am.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we have Nathan Wilson. And Nathan, we're so proud of your accomplishments here. I've read it's the same certificate, so I'm not going to go through it, but I will say that I know Nathan. He has been in my store several times, and he's a very inquisitive young man and very intelligent, and it's going to be very interesting to follow both of your career paths here too. So when I saw that Nathan was a recipient of this, as well as Noah, it brought a smile to my face. So Nathan, I want to present this to you, and I'll ask you if you'd like to make any comments.
Yeah, so just as Noah here said, I would just like to thank Mr. Roberto here and the Boys and Girls Club, and especially the City Council for giving us like a representation here. And I'm sure we're both super grateful for this opportunity and just this success that you guys are honoring for us. So, thank you.
I'll be brief. Mayor Kildee, City Council, City staff, just thank you so much for your collective support and everything you guys do individually as well. Can't say enough. These two guys are just fantastic. I've seen Noah grow in the club, and he spends a lot of time in the design lab. Very creative, very smart. Seen a lot of leadership in him. Makes wise choices. Good moral compass. Nathan came to us as an intern through the RC Makes program and just demonstrated tremendous leadership early on. He's one of those put the team on my back. I'll carry us through kind of folks. I also want to say, much like in baseball, most of the important stuff happens at home, and so just really want to recognize the families and the parents for everything that they do. And because of the foundation you built, that these two young men have been able to grow to the level they have, and it will continue to grow.
Don't go anywhere yet. Council, any comments or anything from any council members at this time? Mr. David, our Vice Mayor David Tennyson.
I would just like to say congratulations. I have a little background with the club, and it's always amazing to watch the young men and women grow up in that club and see what they turn into as they reach adulthood. Keep your foundation that you got from home, your foundation from maybe not Roberto, but Carlos. I know Carlos worked with you a lot. And Carlos is a good guy. Just keep on building upon that foundation, and I'm sure someday you're going to sit up here to replace us old people. Congratulations.
Anyone else? Martin?
Congratulations as well to both of you. I think leaders in our community come in different shapes, different forms, and different ages. And I think that you doing an exceptional job in what you do definitely represents what a leader is in this community. And thank you for being a part of it and helping this community of Camarillo thrive. Thank you also to the parents for your investment in your children, to the caretakers and your investment. And thank you to the board as well, and thank you to Roberto. I know you have a challenging job, Roberto, and I'm always so thankful to be able to support in any way that I personally can, and I think that the investment that the city provides is one of the most important investments that we can do for our communities. So thank you so much and congrats.
Anyone else? Susan?
Nathan and Noah, congratulations. It's a real testament to the work that the Boys and Girls Club does every day, that they can turn out such quality characters like yourselves. And I'm so proud of you. And I'm so proud of your parents as well, and your families, and everybody that supported you in this journey. Congratulations.
Nathan and Noah, congratulations. I want you to know, we have a tradition in this council where if we're in agreement with everything that our colleagues have said, we simply say ditto. And it's very uncharacteristic for me to be succinct, but I will simply say tonight, ditto.
All right. Thank you. Congratulations to both of you. Expecting big things out of both of you. No pressure. No pressure. Thank you, friends and family and everybody else.
Thank you, family.
Let's give them a round.
Thank you, family.
Thank you very much. I'll let them go for a little bit here. Most certainly. You can certainly stay.
Love it when you leave. Yeah.
I was about as successful as you were. All right, so that gets us down to general public comments. Is there anybody from the public who would like to make a comment on a non-agendized?
We do have
item?
one card.
You do have a card, so I'm going to go. Okay. Okay, the first card we've got is Gabrielle Kazemi. Did I pronounce that right? Okay, if you come on up here and you can put that microphone up and speak right into the, oh, there it is right there.
It's right there. It's
Welcome.
Perfect, perfect. Thank
And
you.
if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes, it'd be helpful.
It
Thank you
should
so
be.
much. Wonderful to
Thank
see you.
Thank you so very much. Dear members of the Camarillo City Council, I'm here to talk to you about an important but often uncomfortable subject anywhere sometimes, the Camarillo Animal Shelter. Because on 3/16/25, my neighbor Gloria found a lost little dog, dirty and limping, looking terrible, no collar, no tag, at the Bob Kildee Park. She brought the dog to me to see if I could check the paw and to feed her first. I checked her out a bit, gave her a bath 3 times, dried and brushed out her hair, but encountered too many big mats that I had to simply cut those off. And and she had very long nails. I didn't have a chance ever to do that, to help her with that. It showed to me that this little dog was neglected. There was nothing hurting her one paw, but it was sort of dangling, probably a break that was never looked at by a vet to fix. She had mange on her back that kind of where the mites eat the hair follicles and leave the reddish pinkish patch of skin, about the size of my palm. On her underside, I could see that she had been nursing several litters, and I believe she had been puppy mill. I cared for the sweet dog from the late afternoon on the 16th until Tuesday, the 18th, when the VCS was open again. I brought the clean, loved by me dog there and reported my little story for the intake person, letting them know that I would be willing to pay the adoption fees if the owner couldn't be found or didn't want the dog. She had a microchip. She had been at the shelter about 7 years before with her 4 legs intact, as shown in a picture that was given to me by one of the people. Her name was Mary Lou. I called VCS 2 days later to get an update. To my horror, this little dog was returned to the owner a few hours after I had turned her in, unspayed, with mange, not treated. And there's a little side story. About a month before, a son and grandson of a friend of mine had found the same dog because of that hanging paw. Also at the Bob Kildee Park, taking it home, fed it, and then returned it to the park to see if someone was looking for it. And yes, children were looking for her, and so Mary Lou was turned over to them. So that was at least 2 times that the dog was found over there. This dog was neglected, not groomed, had not had the mange treated, that was there for quite some time. It wasn't something that was new, that was small, it was big.
Gabrielle, if you could wrap it up, I'd
Yes,
appreciate
my
it. Thank you.
appeal to you is to update the City of Camarillo guidelines, rules for the Ventura County Animal Shelter to require all dogs and cat owners in Camarillo to get the animals spayed, neutered before they go home, and to new owners or return to previous owners. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a public comment at this particular point? Do we have any other cards? No. Okay. That's going to get us down to council, staff, and intergovernmental reports. Who would like to go first tonight? Anybody volunteer? Martita, would you like to go?
No, I think we need to approve. Do we need to, where are we at? Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, I'm happy to go first.
You're good, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. March 27th, I attended the Finance Committee meeting. And also March 27th, I attended a tour of Nate's Place, which is a wellness and recovery center for the County of Ventura. March 31st, I attended the Viva la Comida fundraiser with my fellow council members and staff. And April 2nd, I attended the Lennar and Springville street naming ceremony. And then for today, I would like to ask to adjourn in honor of Oscar Pimentel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to go next? Susan, would you like to go? Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you. On March 27th, I attended the Policy Committee. On March 31st, I also attended Viva La Comida fundraiser. On April 1st, I attended the Healthy Camarillo Ad Hoc Committee with Councilmember Tremblay. On April 3rd, I attended the CPA Board of Directors meeting. And yesterday, I attended the Water and Sewer Rate Open House. And I really wanted to commend the staff for a really well-done presentation and question and answer period. There were quite a few residents there, a lot of people with really good questions, and really, a lot of concerns about the rate hike. So I think our staff did a really good job answering them and hoping to provide information. And it was a really good open house. Thank you. That's all I have.
Vice Mayor Tennyson?
Thank you. On March 27th, I attended the Policy Committee. I also attended Viva La Comida and the street naming ceremony. April 3rd, I attended the RDP meeting. And this past Sunday, along with Councilmember Tremblay, I was able to provide the proclamation for 2 young Eagle Scouts. And I'll let Councilmember Tremblay, as our lone Eagle Scout awardee, talk a little bit about that.
Mr. Tremblay?
I think I've just been put on the spot. On March 28th, I had a Metrolink board meeting in Los Angeles. On March 31, Viva La Comida here in Camarillo, and I wanted to thank all of my fellow council members and staff. I know Mr. Ramirez was there as well, and I think other staff was there too, for attending. That's a true community dinner. On April 1st, together with Councilmember Santangelo, the Healthy Camarillo meeting. On April 2, the street naming ceremony, and I want to extend a thank you to our city staff for doing a wonderful job. I think Chantal Limon was in charge of that event, and I thought she did an excellent job. On April 4th, VCTC. On April 7th, the CASA Finance Committee for the CASA 25-26 budget. And then finally, to the Vice Mayor's comments, it's a real privilege to attend Eagle Courts of Honor, and this particular Court of Honor for Troop 858 in Camarillo had 2 brothers receiving their Eagle Award. And there's such a small percentage of scouts who actually receive the Eagle Award that it was really a privilege to be able to see them receive this. And just like you saw a few minutes ago with the parents and the families of the Boys and Girls Club Leadership Award recipients, these scouts have also had wonderful family and friends and teachers and scouting adults supporting them. So it's a real good, it's a real nice event to go to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, so.
Jason did a great job, by the way. Sorry, I was his wingman for the meeting. Thank you.
You did, and so do you. We appreciate both of you attending that. Those are great events. So Thursday, March 27th, I had a Finance Committee meeting, and Monday, March 31st, I also attended the Viva La Comida. If you ever get a chance to do it, go there. It's wonderful. It's a lot of people that you don't get a chance to see very often, and it's just an absolutely wonderful community event here. I'd like to thank our MC for that, Mr. Tremblay. Did a great job that night, and wonderful event. Wednesday, April 2nd, I was able to attend the Lennar Springville street naming ceremony, and the families that got a street named after were absolutely thrilled. And the Chatfield family, the Sholey family, the Guy Turner, and Tweety Rouse as well. Just an honor and a privilege for all of us, and staff included, and members of the public, to name a street after those giants in our city. And I always say that I stand on the shoulders of giants for what they did and how they paved the way for the city that we are and that we will continue to be. It was a real thrill. Thursday, April 3rd, I attended a VRSD board meeting. And last night, towards the end, I did attend the open house water and sewer rates. And there's a lot of really good questions asked there. And I want to thank our staff for being there. Our staff did an outstanding job there. Thank you so much. Okay, so that's what we have on that. So now we're going to get down to the consent calendar. It's item D through K. And I'm going to ask, are there any members of the public that want to make any comments on a consent item? I'll ask that first. And seeing no one come forward, I'm going to ask, are there any questions of council on any of the consent items?
Mr. Mayor, I just have a comment
Mr.
on
Tennyson,
item F.
Okay.
I read the boards, commissions, and committees' annual reports, and thank you to our citizen members that sit on these committees. I appreciate it. One of them that I found interesting was the CTAC annual report, and they meet quarterly at the government centers, the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee. And one of the things they pointed out, and this is not a negative reflection on staff, was that many of the other cities that are represented at this quarterly meeting always have staff members present. And I know I sit on 2 regional committees, RPD and VCOG, and there's key staff members that are present at these 2. I'm not trying to push more work on staff, but sometimes things get done because we have staff present instead of just elected officials. So I just ask the city manager and assistant city manager to look at some of these committees and maybe assign a staff when available to attend the committees as well.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, so a motion is in order? Move consent. The motion and a second. Would we like to do a roll call vote? Voice, please?
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay, Vice Mayor Tennyson,
Yes.
and Mayor Kildee.
Yes. Okay, that passes 5-0. All right, so that's going to get us down to a discussion item. It's a police department crime stats report. And we're going to have Commander Tennyson. Would you like to talk to us about this very important subject?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Kildee, council, staff, and citizens. Thank you for giving me the opportunity tonight to report on our efforts to help keep Camarillo a safe place to live, work, and play. During last year's presentation on crime, I advised council that 2023 statistics would be the last year we reported using uniform crime reporting as our standard. We fully implemented the new National Incident-Based Reporting System, or NIBRS, in 2024. NIBRS significantly changes how we report crime, which means for this first year, we will not have prior year's data for comparison purposes. This does not mean we change our approach to preventing crime or identifying and apprehending criminals. It just means that trend recognition in 2024 was not based as much on statistical comparison to prior years. Just briefly, I'd like to tell you a couple of significant differences between NIBRS and UCRs to help you understand how this will impact us. First, and probably most significantly, NIBRS eliminated the hierarchy rule for reporting crimes. This means when a crime occurs, instead of just reporting the highest level of crime for UCRs, now we report every crime that occurred during an incident, up to 10 crimes. Let me give you an example of this. In the past, let's say someone broke into a home, stole a set of car keys and a purse, then went into a garage, stole the victim's car, and drove immediately over to Home Depot and used the victim's credit card to purchase goods. Now let's say your Camarillo Police Department tracked this person down as they were leaving the Home Depot and found them with stolen property, and also determined the person was under the influence of drugs, in possession of drugs, and maybe even drug paraphernalia. Believe it or not, this kind of thing does happen once in a while. At the end of the year, we would have reported this series of crimes to the FBI only as a residential burglary, which is the highest level of crime that occurred in this incident. Now, under NIBRS, we would report a residential burglary, a motor vehicle theft, a fraudulent use of credit cards, and under the influence of a controlled substance, a possession of a controlled substance, and possession of drug paraphernalia, which amounts to 6 different crimes. We also would report the type and amount of drugs we seized to the FBI. As you can see, this new method of reporting is much more detailed and gives us a more detailed view to make data-driven decisions. With that said, both reporting systems are so different that it's impossible for us to compare 2024's NIBRS data to the previous decades of UCR data. So for this year, and just this year, you won't see any year-over-year comparisons. Additionally, UCR's reported crime in 2 categories, violent crime and property crime, while NIBRS breaks the reporting down into 3 categories, crimes against persons, crimes against property, and crimes against society. You can see here on this slide some of the crimes that fall within each of those categories. This is a slide that I include in my report every year, and the first bullet point never changes. It is important to understand that there are many factors that can influence crime. It's our job at the police department to stay abreast of those factors and to pay close attention so that we can shift resources to address them as needed. In 2024, we saw some negative and some positive crime trends. On the negative side, we'll talk about motor vehicle theft, and on the positive side, we'll talk about thefts and catalytic converter theft. This chart really shows how that difference in reporting impacted crime. In prior years, in the 2 prior years, we saw the lowest numbers of crimes we've ever had in Camarillo. Now, it looks like there was an explosion of crime in 2024, but again, as I explained previously, the 2,852 crimes is really attributed to reporting every single crime that occurred during each incident. As I showed in a prior slide, crimes against person category includes homicides, non-consensual sex offenses, all assaults, and other crime. Breaking down each of these categories into individual crimes, all offenses were relatively unchanged from last year. As you can see, we had a total of 491 crimes against persons. You obviously notice from that, the biggest majority comes from 448 assaults. The assault category includes battery, domestic violence, child abuse, child endangerment, threats, brandishing, and resisting, obstructing, or delaying a deputy sheriff. While this number seems high, none of the categories were outside of what we've seen in the past. Crimes against property has by far the highest number of crimes we have in any category, with 1,447 crimes occurring last year. In this new system, burglaries combine residential and commercial burglaries together. In breaking those 2 down, we saw no change in residential and commercial burglaries from last year to this year. Obviously, the highest number of crimes we have here is thefts, and that's always been our highest crime category in Camarillo. Over 500 of our thefts were shoplifts, with nearly 200 of those categorized as organized retail theft. Most of the thefts occurred between the Camarillo Premium Outlets and the Camarillo Town Center, which includes Target and Home Depot. Many of these stores have excellent loss prevention officers, resulting in the detection and arrest of many of the thieves. As I mentioned earlier, the one area of concern for us this last year was motor vehicle thefts. We had 72 motor vehicle thefts in Camarillo last year compared to 60 the prior year. The most frequently stolen vehicles were Kias and Hyundais. This is a nationwide trend that resulted from the ease of which their ignitions can be manipulated. This information was widely disseminated through a viral TikTok video that still trends to this day. We are continuing to work with the Ventura County Auto Theft Task Force, which we have a deputy on the team, to help in identifying and apprehending these vehicle thieves. Earlier, I mentioned how legislation can impact a crime, and I also mentioned that catalytic converter thefts have trended downward. 2 years ago, in Camarillo, we hit a high of 161 catalytic converter thefts in just 1 year. Last year, starting January 1st of 2024, a new law took effect that regulated the purchase of recycled materials, which included catalytic converters. In 2024, we had 16 total catalytic converters stolen in Camarillo. Previously, we'd have 16 catalytic converters stolen in one night, but largely due to this legislation, we've almost seen this crime eliminated in Camarillo. There were a total of 914 crimes against society, but it's important to understand what makes up crimes against society. This is primarily consisting of drugs and weapons arrest where there is considered no victim. So this type of crime is really an example of proactive policing that occurs in the city when our deputies are out and about stopping violators and making arrests. Response times is one of the many measures of how we are doing as a police agency. We measure response times from the moment a dispatcher receives an emergency call from a victim to the time a deputy sheriff arrives on scene. The response times you see here are only for emergency calls like a domestic violence incident, a medical emergency, or some other crime where rapid response is critical. As you all likely remember, response times were one consideration we discussed when we talked about adding a cover car last year. You see here that our response times were roughly 7 minutes and 8 seconds last year. They haven't changed much in the last 3 years, but we are already seeing the response times in our highest beat areas start to come down in the first 3 months of 2025. I'd like to take a moment to highlight a couple of significant cases that were very impactful to our city last year. Last March, we received an anonymous tip from Crime Stoppers about an adult furnishing marijuana to minors in our city. Our Special Enforcement Unit investigated and developed information to corroborate the anonymous tip. Detectives obtained a search warrant for a home here in Camarillo, and when they searched it, they discovered psilocybin mushrooms, marijuana, vapes, and a significant amount of cash that you see here in this photo. Other evidence at the house directly linked the 20-year-old resident of the home to the crime of selling to minors, and he was arrested. We received criminal information from various sources, and for those wishing to remain anonymous, we highly recommend using Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS, which is 8477. Should be noted that tipsters whose information results in an arrest can actually be paid by Crime Stoppers. Another case I'd like to highlight involving a juvenile from Camarillo involved the unlawful possession of firearms and illegal firearms. Detectives from our Special Enforcement Unit obtained information that a juvenile tagger here in Camarillo was in possession of a ghost gun. Now, a ghost gun is a handgun that is unregistered and has no serial numbers, and this is illegal. Detectives obtained a search warrant for the home and found all of the weapons that you see here in the photographs. They also discovered that the juvenile's father was a convicted felon, which prohibits him from ever possessing a firearm again. Both the juvenile and his father were arrested for the crimes. Another operation I'd like to highlight tonight is one involving organized retail theft. As you may know, the Sheriff's Office received a $15 million grant to combat organized retail theft in Ventura County. Part of this included forming a task force to investigate organized retail theft. In May of last year, the team, including members from the Camarillo Police Department, Thousand Oaks Police Department, Ventura County District Attorney's Office, and Ventura County Community College Police Department, conducted the first blitz operation of its kind here in Camarillo. This operation combined the efforts of law enforcement with loss prevention and store employees at the outlets. Over 3 days, the team identified and arrested 19 people, all of whom were from outside of our city, and most of whom were outside of the county of Ventura. The photos here show just how much property these organized can steal in one theft incident. It also shows that the people who commit this type of theft are often dangerous people when confronted, as evidenced by the handgun in the photo on the left. While discussing organized retail theft, I also want to express my appreciation to the Organized Retail Theft Task Force. They work with our deputies from the station as force multipliers, spending a lot of time and energy at our retail establishments. Last year alone, the Organized Retail Theft team conducted 64 investigations that resulted in 116 arrests. In these investigations, thieves stole more than $117,000 in merchandise from our stores, and in the arrests, the detectives recovered more than $77,000 worth of stolen merchandise. All of this work by the Organized Retail Theft Task Force comes at no cost to our city and is a great impact on making our city a place where people can come and shop safely. One other area that generated some concern for us last year was in the area of traffic, but it's one where I want to add context because I think it's helpful in explaining the increases. As you can see here, we saw an increase in accidents across the board last year. We also had an increase in DUI accidents, and consequently, we had a slight increase in DUI arrests to try and combat this. We constantly assess collision factors so that we can make adjustments in deploying our resources throughout the city. Throughout the year, we recognized that nearly 40% of our accidents were caused by right-of-way and unsafe turning violations. This means that drivers made turns without failing to yield properly to oncoming traffic, or they made turns before it was safe to do so. Speed ended up being a primary factor in about 15% of our collisions. Generally, one of the most effective ways to reduce accidents is to conduct more enforcement, focusing specifically on hazardous violations identified as primary collision factors. Here in Camarillo at the police department, we use our 2 motorcycle deputies to conduct most of this enforcement. This is something we tried to do last year. However, due to injuries and training a new motor deputy, we had a significant portion of last year where we only had 1 motorcycle deputy available. We also have other traffic deputies who investigate traffic accidents and conduct traffic enforcement and make DUI arrests, who are also out for extended periods of time. This resulted in far fewer citations for hazardous violations than we had in the prior year. After the midway point of last year, we had everyone back to work and healthy, and that remains the case this year. We are using data to help us put cops on dots to reduce collisions and make our roads safer. And I'm happy to report that in the first 3 full months of 2025, we are down significantly in injury accidents and DUI accidents. Additionally, it's worth noting that last year we had 28 collisions that involved bicyclists. In 22 of those 28 cases, the bicyclists were actually the ones who were at fault. We are seeing a trend of e-bikes being more common, and consequently, they are being involved in accidents at a higher rate as well. Right now, we are working with the Sheriff's PIO to create an e-bike guide and a video that will be distributed throughout the county to help educate parents when they are making purchasing decisions for their kids. This guide will also be sent to our schools in both school districts so that our partners at the districts can share all of the information with families. Finally, I'd like to highlight a key factor that plays a big role in keeping Camarillo safe. This last year, we redoubled our efforts at getting out and engaging in the community as a way to build trusting and lasting relationships. We regularly conduct coffee with a cop at locations throughout the community. I put the middle picture in here from one of our Coffee with a Cop events. Somebody showed up with their cat dressed in a police uniform, and I thought it was pretty neat. We also conduct Coffee with a Cop every other month at our schools, where we get to interact with kids in a positive way. Last summer, you all funded 4 new Cones with a Cop events at local parks. Many of you attended these events and saw firsthand how something so simple as an ice cream cone results in creating positive interactions between our deputies and our community members. We hosted our 2nd annual Trunk or Treat event at the station, and we estimated approximately 2,000 people turned out for an incredible event. Our team speaks throughout the city at homeowners associations meeting, and we have a robust neighborhood watch program with more than 60 neighborhood watch groups. As important, when our deputies are not working, they're still out in the community working with our youth, coaching youth sports, working as umpires and referees in games, and volunteering in youth groups within their churches, among other things. They are mentoring youth throughout our city in such a positive way, and that can only help in our efforts to keep Camarillo at the top of the list as a place where people want to live, work, and play. I encourage any citizens who want to understand a little bit more about what we do at the Camarillo Police Department to join one of our 2 12-week citizen academies we host each year. We also conduct ride-alongs where one can ride for a part of the shift with a Camarillo deputy sheriff. Last, if someone has an interest in the data side of public safety, you can go to the sheriff's website, the link which is displayed at the bottom of this photograph, and take a look at our transparency dashboards, which display crime, traffic, use of force, and other meaningful data. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Commander, for that report. I'm going to ask if there's any council members that have any questions or comments to this. Martita, please.
Chief Tennyson, thank you so much for your excellent presentation. I have a couple of questions. The first one is for crimes that people are not as willing to report, such as hate crimes. How are they in your data? Because I didn't see a is there a category for that, or?
There is a category for hate crimes, and we didn't have any hate crimes last year. For those who are hesitant to report data or to report crimes that might be occurring, we really try and conduct a lot of outreach. We have some communities that don't necessarily trust interactions with the police, and we are working right now to increase our positive interactions. So, for example, we had a hate crime earlier this year in Camarillo involving some of the field workers out on the east end of town. Myself and several other deputies went out to one of the Monday morning tailgate meetings. We brought donuts and coffee, and we had some really great interactions with some of the field workers who were the victims of that crime. We have another one of those scheduled here for 2 weeks where we're going to go to another farm and meet with some of the field workers and do the same thing. So we're really trying to break down some of the barriers of mistrust and build positive relationships in the community.
I really appreciate that, Chief Tennyson, and I have to say I did speak with the farm where the incident occurred, and they did report that it was extremely meaningful to have your presence there, especially because many of them just felt so terrorized after the incident. So thank you so much for that. The second question is, so it appears that most of our crimes here are theft-related, and you mentioned that they were organized crimes. So are these individuals, most of them coming outside of the county you mentioned?
Yes,
that-
the overwhelming majority come from outside of the county, and again, the overwhelming majority are even outside of the city.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And then my other question is, as you know, I'm a mom who does school drop-offs and pickups every morning and afternoon, and mornings especially can be pretty scary, based on some of the things that I've seen, and I've definitely seen an increased presence at Camarillo High School, and I'm very thankful for that. My question is, have you seen some differences in the data, in terms of incidents? I've witnessed some or have heard of some, and I just wanted to get what the data look like around schools.
Yes, so we have, from the Pleasant Valley School District, we have 13 different districts that we provide, 13 different schools that we provide services for, and then the 2 high schools from Oxnard Union as well. So we have a lot of campuses that we, have to provide traffic enforcement at, and we only have so many deputies working, so we do it on a rotational basis. We have deputies, both motorcycle units and those in a patrol car, who go out regularly and conduct enforcement. We did have an accident recently at Camarillo High School involving a low-speed accident where one of the juveniles was struck in a crosswalk. At that very moment that happened, we had an extra deputy out there on a traffic stop within view of where the accident happened. So, we really rely a lot on that extra enforcement to get people's attention and slow people down and calm people down a little bit because things tend to get a little tense out there. So we pay attention to the data all the time. We did take a deep dive into the data out at Cam High after that accident, and we haven't seen any increases in vehicle versus pedestrian accidents out there. But we are still conducting more enforcement, particularly right now at Camarillo High School, and we do it throughout the year at our other campuses as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And my last is actually a comment. I really wanted to commend you on the vast list of community engagement events that you and your deputies engage in. I think that you're right on target in terms of meeting the community where they are, and especially among more vulnerable communities, people who may mistrust law enforcement more. It sounds like you're really taking that approach of being there. I have attended the trunk or treat, the cones, and have taken my kids, and they all enjoy that as well. And it's all part of the, being a thriving Camarillo family. I also attended the Coffee with a Cop at Starbucks and also at Panaderia Lucero. And I've been asked by multiple community residents when that was going to happen again. So I would definitely encourage that if possible once again. But overall, thank you so much for everything, and thank you for keeping our community safe.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Santangelo?
Thank you so much for your report. I had a quick question about the response times. And it's not part of your report, but what's 2025 looking like? Is it already looking better?
Yeah, so we pay particular attention to the east end of town. When we talked last year and you all agreed to add the cover car, it was going to be adding that cover car out on the east end of town. We had some staffing challenges at the end of last year that resulted in a delay in us filling that position by about a couple of months. That position is full now, and it will be full from here on out. The first 3 months of this year, we've seen a fairly significant reduction in response times for the east end of town. And, you know, we keep focusing with our deputies and our sergeants that beat integrity, staying in your beat, in your area, will help with that. You know, at night, the east end of town tends to be a little bit quieter, and we have deputy sheriffs here who like to take bad guys to jail. So sometimes it's a little hard to stay out in that area. But we are seeing them maintain beat integrity, and we believe that's causing our response times to go down out on the east end.
That's great news. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then my comment is, again, to thank your entire department for the work they do every day. I agree with Councilmember Martinez Bravo that the amount of community engagement you do is so outstanding. And I think that's what truly makes community policing. And I really commend you for that and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Vice Mayor Tennyson?
I'll say ditto. I'm a little envious. You have a lot of resources available. The one thing that I think is important for the council and the city manager going forward, at some point, the sheriff's department always ends up rotating commanders. And I can tell you from experience that someone that lives locally, meaning in our city, is a lot more invested. And I think that's what we're seeing from Commander Tennyson. He has 4 kids in school here, involved in youth sports, involved in a church, involved in nonprofits and service groups. And to me, that's what really makes an effective police chief. And I remember telling him at one point, you have to build up a tremendous savings account of goodwill by your community outreach, because at some point, you're going to have to cover the check that you have to write when you're running a law enforcement agency. But good work, and hopefully they'll leave you here for a while.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Embley?
Mayor, thanks for a great report. It just seems to me, in terms of going from the UCR methodology to the NIBRS methodology, the greatest challenge is trying to explain that to the public and provide context for it, so people can know, well, okay, we know for 2024, we're year 1, and we don't have data prior to that. So I would just think anything we can do to, and I know you did this during your presentation, but to show people in context, these are the trends that we're seeing. And we're seeing improvement on some things and room for improvement on others. Has that been kind of the greatest challenge to going from this uniform crime statistics methodology to the NIBRS methodology?
It is, and it's really not just a challenge in communicating it to the public. It's a challenge for us to work with 2 different sets of data and try and draw conclusions. We are an agency that really works hard at data-driven decisions. And so when you're working with 2 different sets of data, but you need them to marry up somehow to draw conclusions about trends, that's really been the challenge for us. But, you know, we have a great crime analysis unit at the sheriff's office, and none of that is a substitute for just good old-fashioned police work, where our deputy sheriffs are out in the field, they're out walking around in communities, they're meeting people, they're listening up for things that don't sound right, and they're recognizing when we have crimes occurring in greater quantities than normal. So it's just, sometimes it just boils down to the good old-fashioned police work, and we still have that. We have great deputy sheriffs working at the Camarillo Police Department who still keep an eye on those things, and that kind of helps us through this transition period.
I think the hypothetical that you gave when you were explaining about the elimination of the hierarchy rule was really helpful, because you got 10 different crimes in one incident, and then someone sees that graph going up to 2,852, and they draw the wrong conclusion from that. So anything we can do to continue to provide that context for folks to understand that's not a statistic that's in any way connected with the old uniform crime reporting statistic.
Yeah, we'll keep working on that.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, any other comments? I'm going to ask if the public would like to make a comment at this time about that. All right, I'm just going to say ditto. And Commander, if you'd let your deputies and all of the individuals that make our police department one of the best in the state, if not the nation. We're all very proud of all of you. You've got 3 of them here tonight, and you're the best. And we really appreciate all the efforts that you do. This job is 24/7. There's no time off. They're always ready and available for practically anything, if not anything. So again, if you could thank your sworn deputies and all the personnel at the station there. We consider you one of us. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that's going to get us down to items N and M. And M's a ratification of encampment resolution fund grant award. And N is the award agreement for the Reserve Printed Homes and Company Affordable Housing Acquisition Project at 2361 Berry Street. So I'm going to ask our Community Development Director, Mr. David Sanchez, to please take this one, if you would.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. We're pleased to provide a joint presentation for the next 2 agenda items. Both of these items are housing related, and they're on sites that are located in close proximity to each other. These items also represent significant coordination and collaboration between city staff, our police department, and Project Hope and Ventura County Sheriff's Office, which you'll see reflected in tonight's presentation. And with that introduction, I'd like to introduce Ms. Lisette Torres to begin the presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council, staff, and citizens. Today, my name is Lisette Torres, and today, along with Mike Seapack and Senior Deputy Jason Havelka of the Sheriff's Office, we'll be discussing 2 opportunities for the city to increase its inventory of affordable housing, particularly for some of our most vulnerable residents at the lowest income levels. So why are we presenting these 2 projects together? The first reason is proximity. Shown on this slide is a location map with both sites outlined in yellow. This discussion brings together 2 complementary housing projects located less than 100 feet apart: the Berry Street Temporary Supportive Housing and the Arneal Permanent Supportive Housing sites. These sites represent crucial waypoints along our housing continuum, working in tandem to provide a seamless pathway for vulnerable individuals. Once operational, these sites will enable Project Hope to place clients directly into stable accommodations, bypassing the complicated and often cumbersome process of securing privately owned rental units. The strategic proximity of these projects creates an efficient service hub that will strengthen our community's housing support and infrastructure. While the 2 projects themselves are not on today's agenda, understanding the details is essential for properly addressing the grant acceptance and professional services agreement before you. On the left, you'll see a rendering of the Arneal mixed-use project approved by the Planning Commission on June 6, 2023. This development features 9 units, 2 two-bedroom and 7 one-bedroom, plus nearly 1,000 square feet of commercial space to be used by Project Hope to provide on-site services by appointment. Designed in Spanish Mission style to comply with City Heritage Zone guidelines, it incorporates clay roof tiles, exposed rafter tails, jeweled accent-colored decorative tiles, and Spanish archways. The Arneal site was acquired in June 2017 specifically for affordable housing development. On the right, you'll see an example unit proposed for the Berry Street site. Those shown with modern finishes, traditional options like wood-like composite California craftsman style shingles are available. This 3,750 square foot lot was acquired by the city in 2024, also for affordable housing purposes. Under the professional services agreement, the city would purchase and install 6 detached units on the lot, subject to ministerial approval per Camarillo Municipal Code. Unlike the permanent Arneal project, the Berry Street units are intended as a temporary housing solution while we identify permanent housing for clients.
Project Hope contacts people experiencing homelessness every day. And while engaging these individuals, one of the common goals that we try to achieve is finding them someplace to live. In Ventura County, there's just simply not enough temporary and permanent housing solutions for the current homeless population. When Project Hope assists people with applying to housing, there are some barriers that we have to overcome. Individuals with low credit and past evictions are commonly disqualified during the application process of trying to get into a permanent facility. The lack of income and funds make it difficult to pay deposits and make monthly rent payments. Project Hope works with these individuals to overcome these barriers, opening the doors to permanent housing. Just last week, we moved 10 individuals into permanent housing in the city of Camarillo, which we're working with for the past 6 months and more. Despite our recent successes, there are areas of the city that are still in need of these services. In the 2000 block of Pleasant Valley Road and Cali San Pablo, there are 16 motorhomes housing 26 individuals and pets. Having RVs and trailers on the roadway for extended period of time brings up many environmental concerns, including improper waste management and the contamination of streets and storm drains. Many of these residents living in the RVs are employed or receive benefits, but simply can't afford permanent housing. Project Hope does outreach in this area, but are limited to the amount of people we can help due to insufficient affordable housing opportunities. Lizette Torres is now going to talk about an approach to address these challenges and the opportunities we're recommending today.
So as we take into account the work of Project Hope and consider what is needed to move individuals from homelessness to housing stability, we begin to see a continuum as illustrated here in this slide. Project Hope begins the journey by engaging unhoused individuals through street outreach, establishing initial contact, and building trust. This foundation facilitates Project Hope's ability to move individuals to interim accommodations such as our hotel voucher program with case management and skill building opportunities. This continuum culminates with permanent housing solutions featuring affordable housing options and continued supportive services. The 2 projects we're discussing today strengthen the middle and final stages of this continuum. Moreover, this represents a unique opportunity to fund multiple stages of this housing continuum simultaneously, rather than the approach of funding only isolated components. Approval of the ERF grant award and professional services agreement for the Berry Street project directly supports Camarillo's adopted policies by creating crucial affordable housing opportunities within the city and again, building steps within this continuum. These initiatives align with the City Council's objectives for education, enforcement, and assistance strategies, addressing homelessness while strengthening interagency collaboration as noted in the City Council goals and objectives. And both projects respond to community-identified housing needs and fulfill the 2021-2029 Housing Elements Program 17 directive to develop temporary housing resources.
Thank you, Jason and Lizette. I'm now going to get into a little bit more detail about the Affordable Housing Project Professional Services Agreement for the site located at 2361 Berry Street. Later on in the presentation, I'm going to hand you back over to Lizette, and she's going to go over in a little bit more detail about the ERF grant acceptance. So to give you a little bit of background, the proposed site is a narrow, elongated lot with frontage onto Berry Street and with alley access in the back. To the west of the location is a commercial building. It comprises of a donut shop and a bank, and to the east is a single-family residence. Across the alleyway is a parking lot, which currently serves the office building occupied by Frontier Communications. The lot has been vacant for many years and was subject to 27 code compliance issues within the last 20 years, and ranging from overgrown vegetation, trash and debris, and graffiti violations. In early 2023, staff identified the location as appearing on a county tax assessor's list of default properties, and subsequently recommended its purchase to the City Council in August of 2023. Staff identified the location, in July 2024, an RFP to install 6 temporary housing units on site was released, and staff presented their findings to the Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness Committee during their October 2nd meeting, with the committee recommending staff continue working on the project. As I mentioned previously, the site is somewhat confined. The proposal here is to purchase and install 6 individual detached units with minimal drought-tolerant landscaping. The site will be fenced in with a standard residential fence and a pedestrian access gate. The layout will allow for a 20-foot front yard setback, which will blend in with the other residential properties on the street, and should allow the site to maintain an appearance of a single-family property. The individuals placed in these homes will be participants in Project Hope's program. Each tenant will be screened by Project Hope and given ongoing intensive case management and support. This location will form a vital waypoint along the city's pipeline, which aims to graduate formerly unhoused individuals into permanent housing. So as far as the units are concerned, the contract is to purchase and install 5 120 square foot units and a single 180 square foot unit. The 180 square feet unit is going to be adopted to ADA standards, and that's for accessibility. All of the units will be connected to water, electric, and sewer services and will have individual HVAC systems. The units will benefit from sanitary and cooking facilities comprising of showers, toilets, sinks, stovetops, microwaves, and small under-counter refrigerators. Staff anticipates that the units will be installed on manufactured home-style foundation, although the consultant is exploring alternative foundation solutions that might be more cost-effective. All units will have complementary skirting installed along the bottom of their chassis, similar to those installed on manufactured homes. The units will be manufactured in Azure's facility in Gardena, California. The product is American National Standard Institute and Build America, Buy America compliant, and made with a proprietary blend of US-sourced, non-toxic, and volatile organic compound-free recycled plastic, fiberglass, and concrete. Finally, the units will have undergone extensive testing for temperature, seismic activity, along with long-term weather testing to ensure their suitability for habitation. So the PSA amounts to $527,025, with staff also requesting the council authorize an additional 10% contingency of $52,702.50 if required. The agreement is with Azure Printed Homes, headquartered in Gardena, who manufacture their units on site. The company was created in 2019 and worked on several multi-unit projects with private individuals. Although originally mostly working for private clients, Azure, as the housing crisis intensified, Azure have found themselves more increasingly working with local jurisdictions. Most recently, Azure have signed a contract with Dignity Moves to install 60 units to serve the local unhoused population in San Luis Obispo County. The agreement does include the costs associated with the site preparation, basic drought-tolerant landscaping, fencing, and the delivery installation of the units. Now, the initial project has no budgetary impact on the city, as the work contracted under the PSA will be paid for with CDBG grant funds. Just over $300,000 is currently available and already programmed for this activity. Staff anticipates that the remainder of the funds will be available in financial year 25-26, round of funding, CDBG funding, subject to that year's annual action plan and City Council's approval. Staff also calculated the operating budget and forecasted it 5 years into the future with a 4% increase applied to both the operating costs and the rents collected. The rubric on the far right illustrates the anticipated budget deficit after accounting for all rents collected. The funding mechanism to support the remaining operational deficit for this project is yet to be identified, despite ongoing monitoring or potential grant funding opportunities. Staff will pursue additional grant funds as available But if grant funds cannot be identified before the project completion, general fund dollars will be requested to begin operation. Now, we're going to transition into the ERF grant acceptance portion of this presentation. I'm going to give you a little bit more background about the project itself, and later on, Lizette will take over and bring us to a conclusion. So, background. Well, it's a 0.36 acre Arneal Road site, as shown here in the slide above, and it was originally purchased on June 20th, 2017, with legacy redevelopment funds with the explicit purpose of providing very low-income housing. On June 6, 2023, the Planning Commission approved the 9-unit, very low-income mixed-use project in its current form. Since August 2024, staff have been working with the city's architectural and engineering consultant on the site and building design plans. As it stands today, the building plans are approved by the Building and Safety Department, and the improvement plans have been finalized. Now, the project is composed of 2 buildings. They're both designed in Spanish mission-style architecture. To the left of the image, on the slide, you'll see Building A, which consists of about 1,000 square feet of community, office, and laundry space on the first floor, and 2 one-bedroom apartments on the second floor. To the right is Building B, which will contain 2 two-bedroom and further 5 one-bedroom apartments across both floors. The buildings will be served by 16 parking spaces, with the parking lot taking access both from Arneal and the alley behind the building. A matching trash enclosure and complementary landscaping will be installed. If the grant is accepted, city staff will solicit bids for construction management and the general contractor service to carry out the project. I'm now going to hand you over to Lizette, who's going to discuss the ERF grant acceptance and bring us to a conclusion.
The primary funding source that has been identified for this project is the recently awarded Encampment Resolution Fund grant. The ERF grant is a state-administered program helping local governments resolve unsheltered encampments, in this case, the Pleasant Valley Calle San Pablo encampment Deputy Havelka described. To date, the ERF grant has awarded $855 million statewide, with $41 million of those dollars awarded to 6 cities in Ventura County. Camarillo is one of 6 successful applicants in the county. The ERF grant prioritizes safety and well-being of homeless individuals and requires direct paths to permanent housing. It provides funding for comprehensive approaches, including outreach, temporary shelter, and permanent housing placements. In addition, the grant is an advance payment grant. A check in the full amount of the award was received by the city on March 31st, and there's no concern that the state would retract these funds. Turning now to the financial details of the grant, this slide outlines the ERF grant budget and expenditure requirements. The city has been awarded a total of $7.3 million, with the majority, $6 million, or approximately 82%, allocated for the construction costs of 9 units of affordable housing. The remaining $1.2 million covers critical service operations, including $578,000 for hotel vouchers, $326,000 for developer fees, which will actually be reallocated to the construction management costs, $240,000 for case management for the 2 critical years of the grant, and smaller allocations for security cameras, office supplies, temporary RV storage, and $80,000 for operations through June 30th, 2027. We face strict timeline requirements for this funding. By June 30th, 2026, we must expend 50% of the grant and obligate 100% of the funds, with full expenditure required by June 30th, 2027. This aggressive timeline underscores the importance of moving forward promptly with both the temporary and permanent housing solutions we've discussed this evening. Looking at our ongoing operating costs for the Arneal project, this slide provides a clear financial projection for when the ERF grant funds are depleted. Beginning in fiscal year 27-28, the city will face annual operating deficits that require attention. While the initial construction and services have no budgetary impact as are fully covered by the $7.3 million grant, this table shows the long-term financial picture. The operating costs have been meticulously calculated and are based off two similar recent projects in the city and in a neighboring city, and include property management fees, ongoing maintenance, administrative expenses, utilities, required replacement reserves, and insurance. These combine for a total annual expense of approximately $98,000 in today's dollar, with a conservative 4% annual inflation adjustment applied to reach the projected $106,000 projected operating budget by 2027. That's the number you see at the top of the chart. For rental income, we've used an extremely conservative approach based on health and safety code guidelines for deed-restricted rentals to very low-income households. This calculation assumes $572 monthly rent for one-bedroom units and $616 monthly rent for the two-bedroom units after utility allowances, with the conservative vacancy rate factored in of 10%. This produces an annual rental income of approximately $56,000 in today's dollars, adjusted 4% annually to reach the projected rental income of $61,000 by 2027. So this is how the projected deficit is calculated annually: the operating budget minus the projected rent. If for some reason, which we do not anticipate, we were completely unable to collect any rent, the total cost to the city to operate the project would be that far left column, the projected operating budget. On the services side, our existing Project Hope team will continue providing essential wraparound services to residents after the grant-funded case manager position concludes. The team's current staffing, already supported by the general fund, will maintain continuity of care. Importantly, we anticipate the intensity of services required will decrease significantly once the transition from temporary to permanent housing takes place, allowing our current staff to effectively manage the ongoing needs without additional resources needed beyond what's already budgeted. And finally, it's important to note that after the grant agreement expires in 2029, the city will no longer have any contractual obligation to maintain ownership of the project and could consider alternate paths for ownership and operation. However, given the source of funds used to purchase the land, the project must remain as affordable housing. While staff will actively pursue additional grants to cover this operational gap, general fund dollars would need to be requested to continue operation at these projected deficit levels if a funding mechanism could not be identified. This concludes our presentation. We thank you for your time. And for the council's convenience, we leave you with the recommendations for both item M and N. And we welcome any questions you may have for the team. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Are there any questions? Mr. Tremblay, would you like to start us off tonight, please?
Sure, thanks, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thanks for an excellent presentation. Thank you for all of the work that you performed. And I know we've got two separate projects here, but I want to ask you questions about both. I'm conceptually in support of the projects, but with all the questions I'm going to ask, please don't interpret this as being critical. What I'm focused on are two issues. One, the city's annual and ongoing fiscal obligations for these projects. And then basically what I want to know relative to the ERF grant is whether or not there are any strings attached from the state. And I think you've covered a little bit, but I want to circle back to that. So I'm looking at both of those aspects. I want to thank, we got a letter today from the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, the Padre Sarah Parish letter, which is really well done, and thank you. And thank you to all of the folks at St. Vincent de Paul for all of their work. It's critically important. So please don't interpret my questions as being critical. Can we go to back to the PowerPoint slide that has, let's start with the ERF grant. And let's start with the PowerPoint slide that has the category of costs. There we go. Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, let me just make sure I understand this. And again, I've asked staff some questions. Some answers came back to me, and then I know some answers came back today, and I'm sorry, late today, and I haven't had a chance to review them. So the total for this project, for the project that's being funded by the state grant, it's a total amount of 7.3 million, correct?
Yes.
And on the left side are the services and operations that go into that. On the case management of $240,000 per year, that's 120, if I'm understanding it correctly, that's $120,000 per year for the contracted case manager from the county?
Yes, that is
Understand?
correct.
And that person is part of our 4-person team, including you and Jason and
Yes, they would become the fifth team member, essentially.
they become the 15 member. One of the things that was confusing to me in the staff report is it showed 2 different community service coordinator positions. And I'm wondering, are we adding 1 coordinator position or 2?
We would be adding 1 position, so the team currently consists of 1 community services coordinator position that's funded through the HAP grant. That position is primarily dedicated to serving the hotel voucher program, and the time is also leveraged to support other Project Hope needs. This would be an additional position supported by the ERF grant and dedicated to supporting the encampment along Pleasant Valley and the transition from there to permanent housing and the temporary housing in between. The time period overlaps for the 2 positions. However, the most critical need for this case management would be during those 2 years when those transitions are happening. People are becoming stabilized, they're becoming more financially secure, they're navigating the pathway to housing. Beyond that, once individuals are placed into permanent housing, they're considered stabilized, and therefore the need for those intensive services decreases significantly. So we anticipate that Project Hope's current staffing would be sufficient, current general fund funded staffing would be sufficient to manage the needs of the clients.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, Lisette, in years 1 and 2, you have kind of overlapping grant-funded, grant-supported work being done. And in years, in the latter part of the 5-year period, years 3, 4, and 5, you have essentially what we have now, which is general fund, A1 general fund supported position.
Correct.
To do case management.
Correct.
Okay, so what this grant does is it really provides the city as part of this overall $7.3 million grant with a case manager for the first 2 years.
Correct.
Okay, so the additional fiscal burden to the city would be in years 3 through 5.
If the city decided to maintain this additional grant-funded case management position, if they decided to remain at current staffing levels, and the cost would be the current behavioral health position that is funded already through the general fund.
Okay, my understanding though is based on staff's review of the grant agreement and the conditions, and I know I've read them all, there is no obligation, there's no financial obligation to the city after year 5. In other words, after the grant terminates in 2029, the city is not responsible. I'm not saying we wouldn't do it. There's a lot of reasons to do it, but we're not fiscally obligated to the state as a condition of this grant to provide those services. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct.
Okay. Because that's why I'm always concerned about what strings come with a state grant, particularly in this field, in this particular subject area. Okay, so the estimated construction cost is just over $6 million. Can you give us an idea? There's no breakdown of that. I think I've been provided with somewhat of a breakdown by staff, but is my understanding correct that just under $3 million of that grant money, this is all grant money now, would be for the construction of the unit themselves, and another $340,000 for the site improvements, with the rest being general contractor costs and contingency costs? Is that about right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, but all of that is within, Mike, all that's within the rubric of this grant. In other words, we're not spending general fund money for those items. This is all coming from that grant.
That is correct.
Okay. I don't think there was a slide. I know that in reviewing the grant conditions that were in the staff report, but in the exhibit, in the staff report, there's a lot of data tracking that the State Department of Health and Housing and Community Development requires, HCD, let's just call them HCD. And they require quarterly and annual tracking, and then what they're calling a final report, which I guess is at the end of 5 years. Okay, how much staff time is going to be utilized to do all that data tracking, and are those costs within the grant monies that the city is receiving from the state? In other words, the value of staff's time, I don't know if we have that here. I don't think we have that in a slide. Is the value of staff's time, how much time is it going to take? What's the value of it? And is it within the amount of the grant to do all that tracking that the state requires us to do?
Administrative costs were not factored into the grant budget request. The two primary staff who would be dedicated to reporting for this grant would be my position, the Senior Management Analyst position, as well as the Senior Planner out of the Community Development Department. We estimate that about 10% of the time of these positions would be dedicated to reporting, which totals out to about $40,000 annually. And the majority of the reporting and data collection really happens on a client-to-client basis and is submitted through the Homeless Management Information System, which Project Hope and the team is actively using. The remainder of the reporting and the time would be dedicated to narrative summaries, financial summaries, things like that.
I guess one way to look at it, would it be fair to say that that the work that you're doing in that, which is a relatively small percentage of your time, that work is being done anyway by you within the context of the existing, what is it, HMIS system, right? So this time and the value of that time can be assimilated into that obligation, right? Or that workload.
Correct. It's very similar to reporting that is already taking place for other grants.
Okay. In the staff report, it talks about essential operational staffing once the development opens. But it doesn't really describe what that is. Can you talk about that a little bit? Did we have a slide for, I don't think we had a slide for that. Can you describe what essential operating staffing once the development opens? Is that for the case services that are going to assist the folks who are living there, or is that going, by contrast, to the property management side?
Yes, that would be for the property management, the services provided to, run the property essentially, not the services side, which would be the Project Hope team.
And are those expenses within the amount of the grant that the state is providing?
Because the estimated completion of the project is not until close to the end of the grant, which would be, I think, around March of 2027, we were only able to budget for 4 months of that, for operations costs for only 4 months up to the end of the grant because of the expenditure deadline requirements. So there's about $80,000 that could cover operations through that June 2027 date.
So after the June 2027 date, where does that expense come from?
Beyond the June 2027 date, that would become part of the ongoing operating budget. The projected rent would cover a portion of that, and so the projected deficit would be the gap that exists.
So the projected deficit gap is really something that we would have to meet by virtue of general fund, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that is one way to look at what the burden of this would be from a general fund standpoint.
Yes, essentially that deficit. If other funding sources could not be identified, the request would need to come from the general fund.
And so is that what it was meant by in the staff report, by that term, essential operational staffing once the development opens? Because I wasn't quite sure when I read it.
Yes, the property management essentially.
Okay. So under this state grant, it doesn't preclude the city from collecting rents, correct?
Correct.
In fact, I guess it's actually a good thing in that you're making people more vested in their living situation,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So we're offsetting a portion of these operational costs through the rent. Okay. And again, we have no, let me try that again. The city has no obligation after year 5 to operate the facility or continue to offer the services. I'm not saying we wouldn't. I'm just talking about the grant conditions and the legal side of it. The city would not have those obligations, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so it's not a situation where there's a grant with strings running out for years in the future saying that the city has to do particular things, correct?
Correct.
Although there are some aspects that we would have to utilize general funds in terms of the property management and the wraparound services for folks.
Yes, exactly.
But again, we've made it as a policy choice by funding the Project Hope staff that we would continue to offer those wraparound services because we've made a policy determination, sorry, this is actually a speaking question, that this is worthwhile doing.
Yes.
Okay. And the city attorney concurs with that there's no obligation after year 5?
That's correct. I have reviewed the documents, and there's no obligation beyond the termination.
Okay. One of the things that concerned me in the state grant award is that the city, by accepting the grant, has to comply with, and there's 12 different references to current laws, et cetera. And that's really standard for grants. But one of the clauses in there where we have to comply with HCD guidance and directives. Guidance and directives are not law. Guidance or directives are whatever HCD wants to make them at that point. Are we aware of any, and it's not only the guidance and directives that are in place right now, it's any future guidance and directives that HCD has. Are we aware of any guidance or directives that would cause us concern in terms of a fiscal obligation going forward during the term of this grant?
No, we are not.
Okay. So let's get to what's the termination date? April of 2029, right?
Yes.
So conceivably, everything is put into place. The construction's done. We have folks in there, and we're going to be putting, folks will I mean, it will evolve. Those units will turn over. Project Hope will continue to work with them, right? And we'll continue to, in the property management side, put people in these units.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Turning to the ERF grant, and I think you mentioned this before, the legislature has already appropriated these funds, and we've already received a check for them, right?
Yes.
So this is not a situation where we build it and it's a reimbursable to the city. We have the money in hand right now.
Correct. We receive it up front and we report as we spend.
And we're not concerned about any kind of a clawback provision from the state, correct?
Correct. We don't anticipate these funds being retracted.
Okay. And then on the 2361 Berry Street side, again, my questions were principally financial. So if I'm understanding correctly, our operating budget on the ERF grant is different from, on our Neal, is different from the Berry Street budget, right?
That is correct, yes.
Now, the contract for the Berry Street project had as one of its exhibits a nonprofit, I think it was called Kingdom Causes, that said that they would operate the wraparound services. But and that's appended to the contract itself that we're being asked to approve tonight. But my understanding is that's not going to be the case, that we're going to have Project Hope personnel provide those services, right?
That is correct. The exhibit to the agreement contains verbiage relating to that nonprofit. This is because the original RFP also sought wraparound services that since then was decided Project Hope could provide. So Azure's proposal at the time accounted for identifying a partner should we require one. However, it has been, the decision's been made that Project Hope will provide those services, therefore.
Okay, I'm comfortable with having Project Hope staff provide those services, but are we going to contractually modify that so we make it crystal clear that it's Project Hope staff providing those services and not this other entity?
Staff can make that change, yes.
Okay, if assuming that council approves this.
Correct.
Okay. So on this project, is the budget PowerPoint that you have in front of us, does that include this project? Does it include both projects?
This is just for the 2361 Berry Street.
What about the other project?
The ERF grant, that budget, I can fast forward to it.
Well, I guess where I'm going with this, not I guess, where I'm going with this is, we're still going to be in a situation where with both projects, at a period of time, you'll have to come back to council and have council affirmatively say, yes, we want to continue providing wraparound services for residents of these two projects, and we're going to, and we'll be asked to provide, we'll be asked to fund that by using general fund monies as you've estimated, right?
Unless other funds can be identified, that is correct. There's one slight difference to this specific project since it's funded with CDBG grant funds. The grant itself allows us a portion of the CDBG funds to be used potentially for this project. However, that would result in a knock-on effect on the stakeholders that the city works with today and receives, and ones that receive funding under the CDBG grant program.
Well, okay, Mike, I'm glad you raised that right, because this is this project is a CDBG, a federal community development block grant funded project. But do we anticipate that in the future we're going to receive, well, nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, and particularly not right now with what's going on in Washington. So I don't even know I want to go there, but for sake of discussion, if the city were to receive more HUD funding or CDBG funding, we could put that, could we put that funding toward these services?
Potentially, yes. There's a provision that allows for up to 15% of that, of the total number received to manage that project. That would plug potentially that gap.
That might plug, because we typically use that funding for affordable housing. I'm looking at David now. We typically use those funds for affordable housing. This would be within the context of affordable housing purposes, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And maybe to add a little bit of color to that, the money that's been reappropriated currently is the money that normally we would use for purchases of units and things of the nature like resetting covenants and so on. However, the specific 15% that would cover the operational costs here would have to come from a separate pot, although still from CDBG funds, and that pot currently is being used to fund our local nonprofits.
Okay, okay. But conceivably, or at least hypothetically, we would, it's one potential source.
That is correct, yes.
That we would have. Okay. All right. thank you. And those are the questions for me at this point.
Okay, thanks, appreciate that. Any other questions, Commander, sorry.
Commander.
Vice Mayor Tennyson?
Quick question. What is the rental revenue estimate based on for these units? Is that locked into the grant, how much we can charge? Is it based upon the income level of the people coming in? Will we see a fluctuation?
It's based off of existing health and safety code for housing of this type. So it's a HUD, sort of a standard rent. The team also consulted with one of the case managers on the Project Hope team who typically places clients into this type of housing, and she was able to weigh in on what the realistic affordability would be for residents who were trying to place into these units.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo something Councilmember Tremblay said when it comes to regulations that come out of HCD, because the language in the contract, and whenever I read this coming from a state agency, it causes me to tremble, Mr. Tremblay. It says HCD at its sole and absolute discretion shall make the final determination regarding the allowability of ERF expenditures. And my hope is our grant was so well written and everything we're going to spend it on has already been approved, and they won't exercise any sole and final discretion on that.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Questions, Ms. Santangelo?
Most of my questions were covered by Councilmember Tremblay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I just want, so when it comes to the operating the deficit, future councils will have to approve that?
The council at the point in time when the project is constructed and we identify the deficit, yes.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions? Martita?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So the way, first of all, is that thank you so much for your presentation and thank you to staff. It was excellent and very detailed, and I really appreciate it. One question that I have, so my understanding is after 2029, the options that we have to operate, it still has to be a low income type of service.
That is correct, and that is based off of the requirements of the funds that were used to purchase the land, which were the redevelopment legacy funds. They designated the purpose to be affordable housing.
Okay. And then also to summarize, and thank you, Councilmember Tremblay, for asking everyone's questions. But on the two budget slides, so the way that I understand it is those are the worst case scenarios in the event that the city does not attain any additional funding. Is that correct, a way to summarize that?
Yes, correct. So for example, the slide that you're seeing now, that far left column, the projected operating budget, this is for the Berry Street project. That is the total cost to operate the project without rent factored in.
Okay. And the city is going to be actively looking at potential grants, right? This is like worst case scenario, if you do nothing, that's what would happen.
Correct. We will be pursuing as many grant opportunities as are out there.
Okay, wonderful. And then the other question that I had is if you go to the pie chart. Okay, so for this part, when we're talking about temporary RV storage for that 14,000, and it's temporary, so it is for how long, or how did you come up with that number? How many years are we covering that for?
It would be for up to 6 months per the number of clients that we intend to serve. And the reason for that is that this transition period from taking people out of their RVs into either a hotel voucher program or maybe even directly into permanent housing is very critical. Individuals will need time to, address their belongings and come up with a plan for how to address their RVs. And so we're providing that very short storage period. And the cost is based off of just existing costs that we're aware of with current storage facilities within the city.
Okay, thank you so much. And then this question is more from a health perspective. In terms of the composite from the tiny homes, can you speak more about, you mentioned it's non-toxic, in terms of, people living there, the place kind of, getting warm. Is that mostly plastic? Like, what's in that composite? And can you speak more to the potential health impacts or what has been studied?
Sure. So unfortunately, Azure, it's their proprietary blend of ingredients, so I don't have the exact mix. However, the material used has gone through testing, so it's non-toxic and contains non-volatile organic compounds, meaning compounds that do not react with oxygen, for example, and cause cancers or other sorts of diseases. These are built to a specific standard called the ANSI standard, or the American National Standard Institute. And these are standards that include things like fire safety, plumbing, equipment, construction requirements, and things of that nature for park model RV homes. These are nationwide standards, and they go through testing mandated by these standards. They are also tested for International Code Council standards, and the ICC, as they stand for, are the people, the nonprofit behind our building codes. So there are people who design our building codes. Perhaps another sort of shred of comfort is that even in Ventura County, there are now jurisdictions that consider these ANSI standards as appropriate for accessory dwelling units, which are the units that we generally see here in Camarillo on stick-built construction. However, increasingly, not just across Ventura County, but across the state, with the housing crisis being intensified, those rules get a little bit more relaxed, and these are allowed to become what we call ADUs.
Okay, thank you so much. That's very helpful. And my last question is also related to more like the fire safety. Like, has there been any input in terms of, local or state firefighters in terms of the safety around this material?
Yes. So staff shared this project with the fire department, our local fire department. These structures are going to be sprinklered, and we've run it past the fire department. They did not raise any concerns relating to fire safety with these structures.
Okay, thank you so much. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Tremblay, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, one more question, thanks. I haven't seen anything in the presentation. Can you go back to the slide for the ERF grant and the costs?
I'm sorry, which slide?
The slide that has the ERF grant and the breakdown. There it is, ERF grant budget. So it's about, if I'm understanding this correctly, because we don't have that slide up, it's about 2.8 million roughly for the construction costs, right?
That is correct, yes.
Do we know what that is on a per square foot basis?
I do not have that calculation in front of me. I apologize.
I think what I was interested in knowing, if you have the question relative to the square foot cost, how does that compare to other homeless housing projects that have been built recently in our area?
So if I can speak to that a little bit, the costs were extrapolated from recent low-income housing projects here in the city, chiefly from 2800 Berry Street. So we anticipate these to be similar to those of the project at 2800 Berry Street.
Oh, to Vista Company area.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions here? I'm going to ask the public, any public comments on this? I'll make a real quick one. One question is that we cannot force the homeless individuals to take these services. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so this is just another opportunity for us to house unhoused individuals. Is that correct, too?
Correct.
Okay. And also, just to comment, there's nothing inexpensive about doing any of this. However, not to do something is more than likely going to be as expensive, if not more, if you add the years and years and years of this type of situations that we fall into. Every entity is working with this. There's not a magic solution to any of this. We're all trying here. But I believe that this will be another opportunity to help to a certain extent, if not rectify, definitely to help the situation there. So we work very, very hard on this. This is an issue that is ongoing and it's still fluid. So those are my comments. I want to thank the staff for your report and my council members, my colleagues here for all their very good comments on that. So without any further ado, if somebody is interested in making a motion, we have to separate this. We have to do them in two separate motions. So the first would be motion M, and then the second one would be motion N. Yeah, I asked for public comment already. I did. Anybody, I'll ask any of the public want to make a comment on this? Okay. Go ahead.
I'll move staff's recommendation on item M as in Mary.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on item N. Would you please do a voice?
Yes, Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay. Yes. Vice Mayor Tennyson,
Yes.
and Mayor Kildee.
Yes. Second one. We'll need another motion on,
I can motion item N, and I will state a comment, Mayor, if that's okay with you.
absolutely.
There are people in this community who unfortunately are struggling. And I think the city investing in this capacity attends to the root cause of the issue. I think we are extremely fortunate here in the city of Camarillo, not only to have excellent staff, but excellent deputies. Thank you, Jason, for all the work that you're doing with Project Hope. And with that, I know that the issue of those experiencing homelessness is a public safety issue, it's a public health issue, and it's an environmental issue. And due to this, I do support the pathway that the city is taking, and I will go ahead and move staff's recommendations.
We just proceed?
No, first of all, both of these, and I want to make this in terms of both projects. I know we've already voted on the first one, but I really want to compliment staff because I know how hard you have worked on these applications. And this isn't something that we filled out a form a month ago and said, gee, we want some funds. You've invested an awful lot of work in this. The application process has been, I would describe as arduous. And secondly, all of your ongoing efforts in this, and all of the staff of Project Hope, and what wonderful things you accomplish every day. So I'm really pleased with what you do, and I'm appreciative of what you do. I don't think any of us are sure of what's ahead in terms of the homeless population. But through this ERF grant funding and through the CDBG funding, we've got a chance to do these two projects, including the one that I think I just seconded the motion for. You know, and the concept of the wraparound services, I get it, and what that potential general fund burden may be, but in my judgment, the potential general fund burden on an ongoing basis, both from a policy standpoint as well as an amount standpoint, is worthwhile, at least where I can see it as of right now in 2025. So that was a long second to the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Santangelo?
Since we're all commenting, I wanted to add my comment. I want to thank staff as well, the presentation was really well done, but I also want to thank you for the work that you do every day. Coming up with solutions and strategies for those experiencing homelessness is no easy feat, and you work at it every day, and it's not unnoticed, and so thank you. I think that anything we have to put in from the general fund going forward to make these programs be able to continue in a meaningful way is worth it. And so I hope that future councils will see that. I also hope that we'll work hard at grant opportunities and all of those other things that help bring that, those costs down. But that's the comment I wanted to make.
Good comments. Any other comments from you? So we do have a motion and a second. A roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay, Vice Mayor Tennyson,
Yes.
and Mayor Kildee.
Yes, that passes unanimously. With that, we're going to take a 7-minute recess here, and we will be back at 6:57. All right, I'll reconvene the meeting, please. And we're going to go down to item O. It's the review and establish the FY 2025-26 strategic plan, city council goals, objectives, and review the project prioritization. And with that, I'll ask our Assistant City Manager, Carmen Nichols, please, to take the lead on this.
Thank you, City Council and District Board members. This is a two-part presentation tonight. I'll begin the presentation by discussing the City Council's draft fiscal year 2025-26 strategic plan, followed by Mrs. Bobby Dame, Administrative Services Department Management Analyst, who will present on the major project prioritization matrix and outcomes. Tonight is our second strategic planning session with an opportunity for staff to provide additional information and seek your input on the progress of the strategic plan and prioritization methodology. You typically see the recommendation at the end of a presentation, but for this report, it is encouraged that you provide any substantive comments or input throughout the presentations. Staff will compile your input and craft proposed language and also correct formatting or make grammatical corrections in preparation of a final draft for your consideration and adoption, which will be presented at a future meeting. When we met on February 12th, we discussed that the fiscal year 2025-26 strategic plan will look different. The major goal in preparing this year's plan is to incorporate your adopted policies, plans, and direction into the goals and objectives. In other words, align council's expectations, resources, and work plans. City Council prioritization of major projects, as well as operational priorities, are critical as staff translates your expectations into fiscal allocation and staffing resources for incorporation into the budget. Key revisions you will find in the attachment 1, which is a strategic plan of your report, begins with a new goal to strengthen public safety and emergency resilience is proposed. Current projects, programs, and operational activities support the need for a new goal. Not only does the goal reflect good law enforcement, it also reflects projects and programs around homelessness, emergency management, and infrastructure supporting public safety. Major projects and initiatives are currently underway and continue to be necessary in the future for the ongoing advancements in technology and to address aging city facility infrastructure, which supports the need for the technology and facilities goal. A goal is also proposed for natural resource infrastructure management that addresses significant projects and work efforts, both in water and wastewater infrastructure and conservation, and reduction of state water reliance. The Sustainability Master Plan was adopted in October 2023 with several action strategies. These projects range from policy changes to infrastructure projects, which are sprinkled throughout other core values. The Sustainability and Environmental Stewardship Goal strengthens City Council's expectations of environmental sustainability and resilience. In employee relations, the proposed objectives under the existing goal reflect the major project and operational areas that are currently being evaluated by the Human Resources Director. Key revisions also include combining similar goals, objectives, and eliminating duplication. It is proposed to eliminate the existing CSUCI goal and transfer the related objectives under the Intergovernmental Relations goal. Other agency objectives are also moved into this revised goal. The Community Redevelopment goal is eliminated, and community development was added to the land use, transportation, and transit goal to provide a home for similar value areas. As mentioned earlier, a new public safety and emergency resilience goal is created, and existing objectives were moved under the proposed goal. You will note that current and active action strategies were listed under each of the pertinent goals. This provides a quick summary of the items already in department work plans. Not included are the day-to-day operation activities. At the February 12th meeting, City Council was asked to provide input or proposals. This input was incorporated into the draft strategic plan, which is attachment 1 of this report, and we expect that additional proposals will come tonight. I'd like to bring initial council proposals to your attention. Vice Mayor Tennyson expressed the need to create a public safety goal, and as mentioned, any related objectives and action strategies were moved from community enrichment to the new goal. If you're looking at the attachment 1 of which is the draft strategic plan, this action takes the objectives from page 3 to page 5, where the added public safety goal is at. Councilmember Tremblay and, Councilmembers Tremblay and Santangelo currently sit on the Healthy Camarillo Steering Committee. The MOU between the 3 partner agencies was approved by the City Council in August 2024. An update on this objective and action strategy is expected at a following meeting. Expecting council support for continuing this initiative, 2 revisions are being suggested. One is to broaden the existing objective number 3 to reflect an overall wellness approach and change the action strategy to launch the Healthy Camarillo initiative. With council support, staff will submit funding for this initiative in the upcoming budget. Again, the project update will be provided at the next meeting. Councilmember Martinez-Bravo suggested broadening the existing strategy of showcasing nonprofits at the Camarillo Ranch at Christmas time to a broader one that supports the use of city facility by a lead nonprofit for an event that showcases other nonprofits at any time of the year. Again, this is page 3 of the attachment 1. Under the community relations goal, Vice Mayor Tennyson proposed an action strategy on page 14, again under community relations, for staff consideration of a youth Las Personas Academy or incorporate something similar into an existing program. To continue on initial council proposals, on page 15 of the attachment 1, Councilmember Santangelo proposed objective 4 under the intergovernmental relations goal to illustrate the current and future efforts by City Council and staff to communicate and advocate the city's interest with respect to the Camarillo Airport. And finally, Councilmember Martinez-Bravo suggested objective 5 to bring the city and other agencies together to keep the community informed of respective agency business through town halls held throughout the community. Mr. Mayor, you mentioned the need for an objective that demonstrates City Council support for naval and federal employment, and also one that supports tourism and TOT tax. Language has not been developed for these suggestions, but will be incorporated in the next draft. Mayor, I turn it back to you for City Council discussion and to take additional input on the recommended fiscal year 2025 strategic plan.
Thank you for your report. So I'll ask any council members have had anything that they'd like to add, anything to expand on what we said, and I think we'll have Vice Mayor Tennyson start us off tonight.
I just wanted to go to my recommendation of involving youth in an academy similar to the one that just started last year. We could start small and maybe have outreach with our local high schools and create kind of a public speakers group amongst city electeds and some staff members, and we show up at their, when I was in school, they called them civics class. I think they call them government classes. And maybe that's how we start, is having 2 electeds and a city staff member get invited to make presentations so we can address lack of knowledge on a lot of people, especially young people, on how a municipality operates, where we get our money, how we spend it, how decisions are made, and open the door for them to get more engaged in our community and encourage them to come to council meetings and share their opinions during public comment.
Yeah, Martita?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Tennyson, I love that idea. I have young kids too, and I am very excited about the potential of that. coming forward. Councilmember Tremblay and I had the opportunity to go to the high school, and there was a group there of youths, and they are just so motivated. And I always think about how important it is to invest in our youth, our community now, and not wait until you're, much older in life to sit on the dais or serve in our communities in different ways. So I'm very excited, and I'm having all these different ideas for that as well. Additionally, and before I move forward, Carmen, I really wanted to just thank you and staff for the tremendous work that went into this. There is so much work that is not seen, and I just am so appreciative of everything that you do. I know you and I even were going back and forth on the details of some of this, so thank you so, so very much. Additionally, for intergovernmental relations, which is the item that I brought forth, number 5, I wanted to propose just an additional, I wanted to request that staff consider an action strategy under this, and it would be to enhance community relations by strengthening partnerships with local nonprofits and businesses, implementing an annual community survey to assess quality of life, and having staff explore the potential for establishing a formal standing committee or MOU with partnering agencies. So last year, I attended the League of Cities conference, and I think typically we're drawn to whatever we like, right? So I've been attending a couple of the community engagement workshops, and one of the ones that I attended was a presentation from the city of Livermore. So the city of Livermore is a contract city, probably a little bigger than the city of Camarillo. They also have an airport nearby, and they received this award for community engagement. And if you look at their website, as soon as you log in to their website, it automatically leads you to how can you volunteer? And that's part of their community engagement process. And so I did reach out to them. I'm hoping to hear back. But I think that something that they also do is they use the National Community Survey, the NCS, and it is, they call it a gold standard for collecting representative opinion data from residents, and is backed by more than 20 years of research. And if we look at our mission is dedicated to providing effective and efficient municipal services and to promote high quality of life, economic vitality, and a safe environment for all. And I think it's wonderful that we're doing all this work, but I think it's also important to get the input of the community, and I think the way that the city of Livermore did it is something that I would like staff to potentially look at. Let's see here. Yeah, I think that is all that I have. I'm very excited for the path that we have moving forward. I think we have council that is very diverse and brings in so many different ideas, and I'm very excited about implementing that. So that is all I have to say.
Anyone else? Ms. Santangelo?
I just have comments. Carmen, again, thank you for all your work on this. This is a ton of work, and this document is so important for us because it's really our guiding principles, and it's a compilation of all the things that we stand for and that we think are valued in this community and that we want to continue to value in this community. But it also helps. It's a working document because it tells the staff what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so that's why it's so important. I think the changes that have been made all make sense and I think add to the quality of the document that it is. And so I just wanted to make those comments and thank you again.
Thank you.
Mr. Tremblay?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Echo Councilmember Santangelo's comments on the importance of the document. I wish that I could have been at the February 12 meeting, but I had a Fox Canyon GMA meeting, so I missed it. I've always thought that this is the most important objective or most important thing that the council does all year. because not only do we identify our priorities, staff takes this, and then that's staff's priorities for the years. This is the roadmap that we want staff to follow from a policy standpoint. So I really appreciate all of your work on this, and I'm supportive of what's been suggested. Just a process question. On the prioritization methodology, are we going to be doing that next after this document? Because I did have some thoughts on that.
Yes, sir. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate everyone's thoughtful comments. I think it's important that we update this every year, but it's been years in the making, and there's a lot of new things in here. There's some ongoing here, but I agree with what's been said. It's a very important document. One of the reasons why I thought we might put Naval Base Ventura County, because it is the largest economic employer in the county. And we need to make sure that we can do whatever we can do to make sure that it stays viable. I've got several of my colleagues up here that have worked very closely with them over the years, and they provide an outstanding service to our county here. So I don't know if anyone else wants to make any more comments here. I want to thank Ms. Nichols for all your work and your staff too, because it takes a whole lot of people to put this together. As was said, this is a working document, and we work on it the whole year here. And I'm going to ask Vice Mayor Tennyson again. He has another comment or a question.
I wanted to make a quick comment. I love the fact that the current and active action strategies are there. It's a report card for council to look at, but it's also a report card for the public to see, that we don't just sit up here, throw a bunch of stuff into a shredder and put things together, but staff is taking our goals and objectives and creating action strategies to follow in the upcoming year. So I really appreciate that. Just like the agendas now show specific goals and objectives for agenda items, and I appreciate that as well.
All right. Any other comments on that? Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask, are there any public comments on this here? There's no public comments. I'm going to get down to Counselor. Is there any comments or anything that
Mayor?
we need to provide? Yes.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. So that concludes part one, and thank you to the council for your insight, your input to get us here. I also want to thank my colleagues, department heads, because truly it was a compilation of all their work to reconstruct this document, to align it with your expectations. So that concludes the goals and objectives. We'll put a document together for a final product and bring it to the council for final adoption. This is all great work, but it would not be completed without City Council's lead on prioritization of major projects. And so the second part of tonight's presentation, Ms. Bobby Dame will give you a presentation into the methodology and the outcomes of the matrix that we showed you at the last presentation on February 12th. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Dame.
Thank you, Carmen. Good evening, Mayor Kildee and members of the City Council. I'm here today to present on a follow-up to the major project prioritization methodology that staff has been developing since we first proposed the initiative during last year's annual budget workshop. At the strategic planning session on February 12th, staff presented on the goals of the prioritization process and the recommended asset categories and factors. Staff also presented the recommended weights by category as decided by the steering committee, made up of subject matter experts in facilities, water, wastewater, transportation, technology, and other program areas. Today, we will briefly revisit those asset categories and factors as well as the recommended weights. Most importantly, we will discuss the outcome of the primary scoring and secondary ranking for projects that will be proposed for inclusion in the upcoming annual budget and capital program. Our goal is to get concurrence from the council on the outcome of both. As a reminder, this is a list of the recommended asset categories. These groupings encompass a wide variety of city projects and programs. We looked beyond traditional capital infrastructure projects and incorporated additional categories that allow us to prioritize projects that hit other key areas, such as technology, public safety, emergency operations, and affordable housing. The recommended prioritization factors serve as large umbrella categories that allow us to capture the nuance of each factor and represent the needs of each asset category. The recommended prioritization factors are legal compliance, health, safety, and security, asset condition and level of service, equitable community investment, sustainability and resiliency, funding availability, quality of life, project readiness, return on investment, and identified need. Aside from developing the asset categories and factors, the most important task put to the steering committee members was to take each asset category and assign weights to the most relevant prioritization factors. We asked the committee to consider what factors are most important and most influence whether a project is proposed for inclusion in the city's operation or capital improvement budget. These are the weights we presented at the last strategic planning session in February. Hearing no additional objection from the council, we asked staff to use these weights to evaluate both existing projects and any new project being considered for the upcoming annual budget, be it operating or CIP. As we discussed back in February, the weights proposed represent the most important considerations by asset type, but not the only considerations. The committee determined that all proposed projects and programs should be guided first by the council goals and secondly, in conformance with any other adopted plans. For example, the Sustainability Master Plan or General Plan. To score a project, the weights by factor are applied in full or not at all. This results in a total weighted score by which to qualify or potentially disqualify a proposed project. I will pause here so that you can review the proposed weights again as we move through the asset categories. Here we are looking at city facility and library assets. So next, I will show you how the projects in this asset category scored when the factors were applied. For purposes of this process, a qualifying project score is anywhere between 80 and 100 points. In addition to project scores, each department was asked to provide a narrative justification as to why points were or were not assigned for each factor. Subsequently, those qualifying projects underwent a secondary ranking where those specific justifications for each factor score helped determine the final order of projects. The second column here, you can see the project score. That's using the weighted factors in an all or nothing fashion. And then there was a secondary ranking looking at the justifications for each project. Those ranked projects above the red line will be the first to receive funding and staff resource allocations in the new budget. Please note here that Dizdar Park and the City Council Chambers remodel have not been scored as those projects are nearing or at completion. And I'm going to pause here if you have any questions.
I have one question. I just want to make sure that the proposed weight is like 20 the most important, or is that the maximum you can give them, or how do you break that down?
So the way we broke it down is that if you could make an argument or a justification for the legal compliance factor, you got all 20 points. We wanted to make this as objective as possible and not have there be a sliding scale where the score could be skewed.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Ms. Tremblay, did you have a follow-up?
I had a number of questions regarding the matrix and the scoring and the weighting. I don't know if right now Bobby, you're right in the middle of your presentation, so I didn't want to interrupt now, but at some point I'd like to come back and talk about these particular points. I wasn't at the February 12 meeting, I'm sorry, because I had GMA, but I reviewed the audio and then subsequently asked staff a number of questions on how this weighting was done. And so I've got some follow-up. So I don't know if now is the right, do it
Let's
later?
have her complete. and
Finish
then
it
I'll-
up and
we'll
then,
get-
then we
we'll-
can go back to it?
we'll circle
Okay,
back.
yeah, and if you have any specific to this asset category, I'm comfortable taking those now, but if you want to hold it till the end of the presentation.
I'll just wait till the very end
Okay.
of your presentation.
Okay. So next, we're going to look at housing assets. the green table are the proposed weights by factor. And here you will see proposed projects, 2 of which you took action on earlier this evening, and one, the Vista Camarillo project that council had already taken action on. Again, following the same process as DISDAR and the chamber project, council has already stated their will there, but the other 2 projects we heard about earlier this evening. The city, I just want to mention, is also actively seeking additional opportunities for affordable housing projects and is in conversations with the county. Next, these are the factors and proposed weights for public safety assets. We don't have any proposed projects that hit this category, although there is an adaptive traffic signal project that is going to be done in coordination with the Sheriff's Department, but that is being scored under the technology asset category. Next, we have sanitary and storm drainage assets. I have 2 slides that represent, first, the sanitary assets. They have the same factors and proposed weights, but due to the list of projects and kind of the complexity of the 2, I have them broken out here. So above the line, you can see the projects that scored high, and then below the red line, projects that didn't score as high. And I just want to mention that that doesn't mean those projects are canceled or they're not going to be completed. They're just going to be phased in accordance with making sure that we address from a funding and staffing standpoint the priority projects first. Next, we have the storm drainage assets. And again, we see the projects that scored high and in their final ranking, and then projects that scored below the 80-point threshold. And we have technology assets. We have 2 projects, the Santa Rosa Road Adaptive Traffic Signal Project and the Enterprise Asset Management System, which staff will be bringing back in the fall for system selection. We have transportation and circulation assets. Again, the proposed factors and weights in green, and then the projects that are proposed for the upcoming budget in blue, and the projects that are above and below the line here. And lastly, we have water enterprise assets, proposed weights and factors, and the scoring outcome. I do want to mention here that we have advanced metering. While it didn't score 80 points, we have it above the line. We've made the decision to move forward with that project. There are a lot of reasons why, a lot of really good reasons why this project is important for the city and for advancing sustainability and our technology modernization. And when we talked at the last meeting about identified need as being a kind of a points that can be added to a project score at either city manager or the council's discretion, this is a project that I think fits that mold, where maybe doesn't score traditionally high in a water infrastructure enterprise asset framework, but is a very important project. So that's all I'm going to show you tonight as far as asset categories and the outcomes. Concurrence with the primary scoring and the secondary ranking will allow staff to continue working on program funding and staff resources for year 1 projects. We welcome continued feedback from the council throughout this process, and I'm available for questions any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you for that report. Questions? Mr. Tremblay, would you like to start off?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So, Bobby, thanks for the presentation, and thank you to staff for all the work. Having had the chance to watch the audio, listen to the audio presentation for February 12th, I was able to ask staff some questions. And first thing is, I really want to compliment you on all the work that has gone into this, but this is not something that we have invented on our own. We've utilized, for example, a prioritization matrix from I think it's from the city of San Diego, right?
City of San Diego was one of the cities that we looked to as an example of a really robust prioritization policy. They actually have an adopted policy. We did look to neighboring cities in the county to see what they were doing, but we didn't feel like the level of prioritization happening in our neighboring cities was at the level that we were hoping to achieve. So San Diego kind of had that really robust framework that we were hoping to emulate at our city.
They did. They had a really good policy. Okay, so in terms of, can you go back to the sanitary and storm drainage assets matrix? So, and I'm just, it could be any of these actually. Leave it, yeah, sanitary and storm drainage.
Okay.
So basically, your thought is that you're going to tier, not TIER, any projects that have an 80 or above score in terms of
Yes.
priority?
Yes, so that secondary
So-
project ranking is the tiered.
So, okay, so there'll be a tier 1, a tier 2, and then projects that fall out?
Yes, and the projects that fall out don't mean that they fall off of the CIP plan or future budget plans. It just means that when we look at funding and staffing resources, particularly for year one, we are going to focus on the projects that are above the line. If we have sufficient funding, it doesn't mean that we won't get started on something that's below the line, or maybe these projects, when revisited and scoring next year, will have potentially different scores depending on readiness, funding identified, things like that. So this isn't its score forever, but this is as we evaluate next year's projects, how the justifications
Okay.
shook out.
No, thank you for the answer. So, Mr. Mayor, I have some thoughts on some of the weightings given on these different assets, but I don't know if this is the right time to go down into the weeds on those. So let me know when it is. Right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
think it's good now.
First one is on public safety. And I think on, I'm looking at the project prioritization matrix that you gave me, or gave us. And I think the health/safety/security proposed weighting is too low. I would propose that we make it a 30. To me, public safety is, along with many other things, is so incredibly important. I would put more weight on that. I would bump it up 5 points. I'm still wrestling with the idea of what equitable community investment means, and I think it means different things to different people. But what I do know from a public safety standpoint is that when you've got health, safety, and security there, I think we need to be bumping that up as much as possible. So that would be my first comment and request, that we assign more weighting on that public safety, on the health/safety/security side. The second weighting, the other two weightings that I have comments on are the sanitary and storm drainage assets and the water enterprise assets. So if you go to the sanitary and storm drainage assets, legal compliance is 35, but for the water enterprise assets, it's only 10. And actually, Bobby, can you bring up the results of the sanitary and storm drainage assets? Okay, so isn't it interesting? Look where WRP upgrades phases 1 and 2 are. They only got a project ranking of 5 and 6, even though they got a project score of 90. But we know that we have to upgrade and or replace our water reclamation plants, the most expensive project we'll have in our city's history, public works project. But I'm a little concerned that we are underweighting the legal compliance side, particularly on sanitary and storm drainage, and I would bump it up to 40. And I'd probably, in terms of project readiness, bring it down to 5, although I recognize that project readiness has scores of 10 for sanitary and storm drainage assets, for transportation and circulation assets, and for water enterprise assets. So I would bump it up by 5 points on the legal compliance side, because we know we have to do it. There's no two ways around it. And it ought to be a score that is equal to health, safety, and security. I think those two should be the same weighting for sanitary and storm drainage assets. And then finally, thirdly, for water enterprise assets, I think we've got to bump up our legal compliance side to 15, and perhaps make the asset condition 5 instead of 10. So that's what I would, those are the 3 changes that I would suggest that we consider. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right, other council have any comments on this at all? I tend to agree with all of these. I think there's certain things that we have to do, and if we don't, we're going to see a whole lot of consternation on that. To bump it up, does that mean we have to lower what others will have to, perhaps you can bring the slide up again and we can talk about these 3 things if you would?
Sure. It looks like, at least while we're at water enterprise assets, the recommendation is to increase legal compliance by 5 to 15 and reduce asset condition by 5 to 5.
And would you also reiterate, Mr. Tremblay, the reason why you feel the legal compliance should be bumped up?
I view the legal compliance side on the water to be equivalent, even though it's not equivalent in terms of weighting, but just as important as for wastewater.
Is there agreement on that?
I have a question for, so asset condition, that's just like the staff's evaluation of what that current project looks like or what that current site is like?
Yes, so the way we defined it through the steering committee in this process was asset condition is, can we increase the reliability of the asset by taking action? Does the asset fail to meet basic service needs? Or are we addressing an infrastructure deficiency that's been identified in another city plan, for example, like a wastewater master plan or another such plan? So yes, it's really addressing a deteriorating asset or an asset that is perhaps beyond its useful life, or preventative maintenance on that asset is becoming so expensive that we need to address a deficiency.
So I guess my only concern, Councilmember Tremblay, would be if we would decrease that to 5, wait, we're looking at, this is the one we're looking at?
Sorry, let me
No.
move
No, we need to
back
go
to water.
Yeah.
This one, right? Yeah. So if we decrease it to 5, I'm just concerned about, evaluating a project that may not need like the immediate attention. That was my only concern. Like if we're using,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like if
Yeah,
we're.
and I hear that, and I was trying to thinking this through. I agree with that, but on the other hand, the readiness to me is, readiness is extremely important, but what far outweighs that in terms of whether or not we ought to push forward with it is what we have to do in terms of compliance and health, safety, and security. And that same comment applies to on the wastewater side as well. Even though we may, we're not ready to build a new treatment plant yet. We're not ready to upgrade the existing one until, help me, Mr. Klotzel, 28, 29, right? But we know how critically important it is. We know how we have to get there. And so that's why, just from a prioritization weighting standpoint, we need to get there. So that was the rationale that I used.
So
However
wait,
imperfect.
you're asking to take the 5 from project readiness or from asset condition? Because I was asking about asset condition, but you're talking about readiness.
Oh, you're right. I changed horses, didn't I? Actually, I was asking about asset condition. You're right. But I would take it either
But I
from
think it
readiness
would
or asset condition.
for me, it'd make more sense to take it out of the readiness instead, if we were to take it out.
I think that's why I changed horses, because I like your explanation better. So
Okay.
I stopped with asset condition. So I agree with you.
Okay, sounds good.
All right?
Thank you
Is
for
there-
that feedback.
Is there concurrence on that?
One quick question.
Vice Mayor?
I'm sorry. Bobby, would any of these proposed weight changes impact the ranking that you showed us previously?
Potentially, we'd have to rescore them. I don't think there'd be a significant impact here. If we move forward, we'll see how many projects are just below the line or just above the line. I don't think there would be a significant impact, no.
I wouldn't think so, but I would like to see if there's any changes what you showed us today and what may change with the change of these weighting factors.
Okay, we can definitely do that. And I just want to reiterate, if there was a change that was significant or didn't align with the values of the council, that's why we have that identified need factor that could move a project that is still of importance to the council or still represents the goals for the next year that can get moved above the line.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Bobby, I was wondering, could you go back and show what the potential changes are again with the slides? I think there was 3 potentials, I believe.
Yes, so I think we've addressed the water enterprise assets if the council's in agreement. And then we'll look back at, I'm gonna move all the way back to public safety and then move us forward again. So public safety, there was a recommendation to increase the health, safety, and security by 5 points to 30, but I don't believe I heard a recommendation on the offset.
The offset was, okay, on the sheet I was given, we had equitable community investment at 20. I brought it down to 15. Now on this slide, it's at
This is
15. So I think I'm dealing with a sheet that is dated. This is the one I was given by staff.
Okay.
So
So we'll bump this up to 30 and then double check that, the difference between what you are looking at and what we have here.
I think what you're proposing is already what's here. Right, Councilmember Tremblay? You were saying,
Well, I had wanted to bump up
Two.
health, safety, and security to 30.
Oh, I
just didn't
see.
think we were, and I wanted to bump down the equitable community investment to 15. I'm dealing with I haven't seen this before. I was dealing with a weighting that was given to me before the meeting, so, and it's obviously now been superseded by what's in front of us. Can you explain to me again what equitable community investment means?
Yes. So equitable community investment is revitalization in the community, a project that addresses disparities or improves accessibility.
How do you frame that in terms of a public safety asset?
So public safety assets are also encompassing emergency operations and emergency response assets. So there's a combination of projects included here. And I believe that the equitable community investment was in regards to that emergency response component or a project that might address emergency preparedness.
Well, on the sheet I was given, the only other category in which there was even a score for equitable community investment was a housing project, and it got a 5. So I guess what I would suggest is that we take 15, we change the 15 in the equitable community investment and decrease that to 10.
Okay.
So that we could bump up the health, safety, and security to 30. I'm going with your new matrix. I had the old sheet apparently that I was given. So that's what I would suggest.
So
We go with a 30 for health, safety, and security. Oops. It disappeared. and a 10 for equitable community investment.
Okay.
Okay, so that would give equal weight to quality of life, correct? They would be equally weighted,
Yes.
both of those.
Yes.
Right. Which I think is consistent logically.
Any thoughts, council members, on that?
And then lastly, there was a recommendation on the sanitary and storm drainage assets to increase legal compliance by 5 to 40 and reduce project readiness by 5 to 5.
And the reason for that is that we're not quite there yet to do the project, but we want to make sure that all the information is gathered correctly before we go
Yeah,
out
and
to
I
bid, of
think from
course.
I mean, you can always go to the identified need discretionary category, but when you have the WRP upgrade phases 1 and 2 scoring number 5 and 6, that isn't high enough in my personal opinion. That's why I want to bump it up a little bit.
Okay. And I think the thought, just to address that comment on the ranking for some of the projects in the CSD, is knowing that reclamation plant replacement phase 1 and 2 are still some years out. There are some really critical near-term projects that we want to make sure we're addressing, namely the force main and the generator project.
Understood. Yeah, we have so many, that's the category where we have all these projects and we got to get them
All
done
critical.
soon.
All right. Council, is everybody on board with these prospective changes? We good? Okay, Ms. Nichols, is there anything else that you need to bring forward or anything at this point?
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing for tonight, so we'll take your input for both the goals and objectives and also the project prioritization matrix, make those changes, bring back a final report to the City Council. We'll ensure that our attachments are read the same as our matrix on the presentation. So we'll bring all that back to you for your adoption at hopefully the next council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Great report. Thank you, Bobby. I really appreciate all your efforts, and the staff, please let them know that it's appreciative. All right, so I'm going to get down. Are there any public comments anymore? I'm going to do that once again. If there's any public like to make any comments. Seeing no one come forward, I'm going to ask our city attorney, do we have any comments or reports or anything out of closed session tonight?
There was no reportable action from closed
No
session. Thank you.
reportable action. Okay. So before we get down to adjournment, I'm going to ask Councilmember Martita to talk a little bit about the memory of Oscar Pimentel. But before we do this, and this is not on the agenda, I am going to congratulate our very, in my opinion, new city clerk, Carrie Wheel. Congratulations for being our city clerk. We didn't have to look far to find you, but we've got the very best, and her staff are tremendous. And we're really happy for you, Carrie, and thank you so much for taking the job. And all of us work very closely with you, not only as council members, members of the public, but staff too. And I just can't give you more accolades, Carrie. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you very much.
And I'm going to ask my colleagues, would they like to say anything? If not, we will. Yes, Ms. Martito, why don't you start us off here?
Carrie, you're amazing and you continue to do amazing work. And I'm always very thankful for your presence and your availability and your willingness to always help when I have many questions. So thank you for always being there, and thank you for the very good service. And we are extremely proud and honored to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Dennison?
Carrie, I have to specifically thank you for helping me with the Form 700. I couldn't have done it without you.
No kidding.
Congratulations.
That's so true.
Ditto.
Mr. Tremblay, anything tonight?
Ditto.
Okay. Susan, anything tonight?
Thank you, Carrie, and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much. So with that, we're going to adjourn in the memory of Oscar Pimentel, and I'm going to ask my colleague Martita to please make a few comments on him as well.
Thank you so much, Mayor. We could get the slide pulled up. Oh, there it is. Thank you, City Council, for allowing me to adjourn in honor of Oscar Pimentel. I'm going to say a few words in English about his life, and then the family, his wife, who's also a farm worker, and his two daughters are watching from home, so I'll say some words in Spanish as well. And before I begin, I would also like to thank Assemblymember Steve Bennett for passing a resolution at the California State Legislature to commemorate the life of Mr. Oscar Pimentel. Oscar Pimentel was a resident of the city of Oxnard for 21 years, where he devoted his life to working as a farm worker in the county of Ventura. 17 years ago, he met the love of his life, Griselda Quiroz, and together they raised their two daughters. Oscar cherished spending time with his daughters, often taking them to karate and fitness trainings. Oscar was a steadfast and responsible farm worker who worked hard to ensure his family had everything they needed. He was hardworking on the agricultural fields when he collapsed during the heat of day on September 7th, 2024, at the age of 43. During that incident, the Camarillo Police Department and Deacon Arnold Reyes from Padre Sarah Parish responded, and I'm very thankful for their service to taking this call and for being there with the family at the site of the incident. Oscar's unexpected passing has generated increased awareness about working conditions in hot days, as well as investigations by the Ventura County Medical Examiner's Office and the California Department of Industrial Relations Division of Occupational Safety and Health. Throughout his life, Oscar Pimentel demonstrated the most appreciated human qualities, universally recognized as true indicators of a full and meaningful life, and that he was admired and valued for his kindness, generosity, love for his family, wonderful sense of humor, and his genuine willingness to share his time and talents with others. His memory will be treasured by his wife Griselda and his 2 daughters and many of his close relatives and friends. Muchísimas gracias al Ayuntamiento de la Ciudad de Camarillo por levantar la sesión en honor a Oscar Pimentel. Para Griselda y sus hijas les voy a leer un poco de la resolución que fue pasada por el Assembly Member de la Asamblea 38. Considerado que el fallecimiento prematuro el 7 de septiembre de 2024 de Oscar Pimentel a los 43 años ha sido recibido con gran tristeza, aunque también con una profunda gratitud por una vida bien vivida, una vida ejemplificada por su compasión, lealtad y compromiso con su familia, su comunidad y sus amigos, lo que llevó a quienes lo conocieron a ser mejores gracias a su influencia, y al pueblo de California fuera servido con sabiduría y dedicación. Y considerando que Oscar era residente de Oxnard durante 21 años y dedicado trabajador agrícola, Oscar Pimentel conoció el amor de su vida, Griselda Quiroz, hace 17 años, y al casarse con Griselda y unirse a ella en la crianza de sus 2 hijas, Oscar disfrutaba pasar tiempo con sus hijas, llevándolas a sus clases de karate y entrenamiento en el gimnasio. Y considerando que Oscar era un trabajador agrícola firme y responsable que se esforzaba por garantizar que su familia tuviera todo lo necesario. Oscar se encontraba en su labor cuando colapsó durante el calor del día, y su fallecimiento inesperado ha generado una mayor conciencia sobre las condiciones de trabajo en días calurosos, así como investigaciones por parte de la Oficina del Médico Forense del Condado de Ventura y la División de Seguridad y Salud Ocupacional del Departamento de Relaciones Industriales de California. Y considerado que el trágico fallecimiento de Oscar, la organización sin fines de lucro Friends of Fieldworkers, cuya misión es apoyar, celebrar y abogar por las familias y de trabajadores agrícolas en el Condado de Ventura, ha estado trabajando para apoyar a la familia de Oscar mediante la recaudación de fondos y difusión de su historia. Y considerado que a lo largo de su vida, Oscar Pimentel demostró las cualidades humanas más apreciadas, universalmente reconocidas como verdaderos indicadores de una vida plena y significativa, y que fue admirado y valorado por su amabilidad, generosidad de espíritu, amor por su familia, maravilloso sentido de humor y su genuina disposición para compartir su tiempo y talentos con los demás. Su memoria será atesorada por su esposa Griselda, sus 2 hijas y sus numerosos familiares y amigos cercanos, por lo tanto. Y resuelve el miembro de la Asamblea, Steve Bennett, que se une a la familia y a los amigos de Oscar Pimentel en la celebración y el reconocimiento de los logros y el legado de un individuo distinguido y solidario, quien vivió la vida plenamente, cuya generosidad se extendió sin vacilación ni expectativa de recompensa y cuyo espíritu vivirá para siempre en los corazones y recuerdos de sus seres queridos. And with that, thank you so much for allowing me to adjourn in the honor of Oscar Pimentel.
Thank you for your comments. So with that, we're going to adjourn in the memory of Oscar Pimentel.